Hey everyone, it's Walter Bound here. Let's do some analysis of this great short story that James Joyce said blew his mind when he read it. Um, okay, so it's very late. So we know death is coming, right? So if a story starts late and everyone had left except an old man, he doesn't want to die, right? I just want the light. And there's no sun, there's only electric light, and that's all I need. And because I don't want to die. And if we see this story of the clean, well lighted place as a metaphor for a heaven, but a heaven on earth, because with existentialists, there is no heaven, right? So Hemingway here, in his patented style of just very terse, simple sentences with, I see like, what, two commas in this paragraph, but the ambiance, right? Um, we have the day and the antithesis with the night. In the daytime, the street was dusty, but at night, the dew settled. So it's the nighttime that's the time for people to relax, especially if you're old. And of course, nighttime, we think of death, we think of, lights out kind of thing, but you're not ready for it. And the older waiter, the older patron, the drunk, they know the difference. We have two waiters, both are the foils for each other. And the older waiter, of course, feels a kinship with the guy, the old man who's drunk. Um, and the younger waiter is impatient because he's not ready for death. He has a wife, he's full of vitality. Then, of course, a great short story is going to get to the conflict immediately. There's really no time for exposition. Last week, he tried to commit suicide. Why? Notice the lack of dialogue tags. He said, she said, he said, he said. Sometimes you get that, but Hemingway, he likes to drop that just for the naturalness of the conversation. Because you get it. If you listen to it, you don't need the he said, she said thing. Why did you do it? He was in despair. What about? Nothing, right? This seems like a great irony, right? Like, why are you in despair? Did you lose all your money? Did you lose your wife? What's going on? Nothing. Because if you believe that there is nothing after this life, that is despair in itself. And the only thing that brings you joy is going to a cafe, enjoying the quiet. You're not talking to anyone, but you're still around people, right? So there's this existential despair that we have one life to live, and there perhaps is no meaning, right? But it's the meaning that we give it. And of course, we could talk about like the myth of Sisyphus here, and World War One destroying the belief in God, king, and country, and things of that nature. So we had the waiters, the banter again. How do you know it was nothing? And the younger person would say, he has plenty of money. Why would he want to kill himself? He has money. Now, a young person full of life, he is not confronting his death yet. He's not confronting mortality. He has a wife. He's young. He wants to go to bed with his wife. And of course, the younger he sees this soldier, they see this soldier walking by in the street, and he's with a girl. Now, we can assume the girl's a prostitute. Why? It's late at night. She's not wearing a head covering. I know this says, Mr. Bound, what's that about? Well, she's probably a prostitute. And so the younger waiter, the younger men are full of sexual vitality, and they're not thinking about death. They're thinking about, what I need to do, right? And they're thinking about their own carnal needs, right? Their own human sexual desires. That's just natural, right? So the old man is sitting in the shadow of the leaves, all right? So this idea of the shadow being in the shadow of death, and the leaves and moving slightly in the wind, it's very comforting, right, to this old man who drinks and he has this dignity. All right, for Ernest Hemingway, this idea of dignity was so important that one would die with dignity, one would live with dignity. That was so important. Personal integrity, it was so important to Hemingway and his characters. Um, and the guy says, well, the guard will pick him up. It doesn't matter if he gets what he's after, and we can kind of know what the soldier is after. He's after sex, right? And so the older man is like a father figure and concerned both about the younger waiter giving him a lesson and also about the younger soldier um, who might be picked up by the military police. Of course, it's imperative for the younger waiter to be one that is waiting on the older person. Think about, the impatience that young people have with older people. If you are behind an older person in a supermarket and they're going very slow and you just want them to move, or they're driving very slow, I know I feel that way sometimes. I'm like, come on, let's just move it on, Gramps, right? But we need to be able to empathize with people who they're in no rush and we're in a rush. We have tons of stuff to do. But the old man, he just wants to live. And when he gets kicked out of the cafe and has to pay for his drinks, in a way, going home, going to bed, is sort of like going to your death symbolically, right? So if you keep the light on, even if it's an electric light, there is still life, because the great fear of just being nothing, right? If you think of, now this is a very dark story, of course, written in a very dark time, um, but think of life before you were born. Well, that's our future. If we think it like as an existentialist. And I know this as a waiter. I used to wait on this guy at the hotel, and he would close the place. He was a camper, and I was young, 19, 20 years old. My friends were waiting for me. I had stuff to do, but this guy would just sit and nurse his drink and nurse, and you know I was impatient, right? Um, so would I say these things too? That I wish you would kill yourself and all this stuff? No, no, it's just mean. But the idea that you're such a waste, you should just kill yourself. And now he's deaf; he can't hear, right? Which is also symbolic of his breakdown, of his senses failing him. And if you can look at the banter here between the two, and sometimes it's hard to uh, differentiate who's saying what. Like, why did they cut him down? He tried to commit suicide. Well, fear for his soul, that if you were a suicide, you wouldn't go to heaven, that you couldn't be buried in a Catholic graveyard, right? And then the younger waiter says, "How much money does he got?" No, he's got plenty. Says he must be 80. Anyway, which is, I would say he's 80. All right, so this idea that the younger waiter still is like, well, he has money, why does he need to kill himself? And but think about how lonely this guy is. He has no wife. He is he has nothing to do except go to a cafe at night in order to feel like he is still alive. And of course he's like, I want to go home, right? It's ridiculous, 3 o'clock. But the older waiter says he stays up because he likes it. He's lonely. I'm not lonely. I have a wife waiting in bed for me. Again, this sexual urgency. And notice the younger guy. The younger waiter says, a wife would be no good to him now. He's old. He's 80. He's not going to be having sex or whatever. So he sees a wife as like satisfying a need rather than being a companion. Well, he has a niece, and you're the one that he says she cut him down. You know, and then he says, I wouldn't want to be old. An old man is a nasty thing. Think of the Who when they say, I hope I die before I get old, right? Then you get old, and Pete Townshend's like, I didn't know, that was a bunch of BS, right? But the older waiter defends him and says, no, he's clean. He drinks without spilling. Even now, look at him, right? This idea of dignity, that even though he's drunk, he has dignity. And the younger waiter was saying he has no respect for people who must work. Doesn't he know? Doesn't he care about me? Well, no, not really. He's like, I am, because the younger waiter is selfish. He can't empathize with the older man who needs this place because he does not want to die, right? He wants to be clean. He wants to be peaceful. He wants it to be the heaven that will be denied to him, not because he did anything bad, just because of the existential belief that there really is no meaning. We are just here like ants, like gophers, like grass. And then when we die, we die. And that's it, right? Um, and the older waiter can understand this because he's the one that closes down and then goes to a place that's not like the cafe. It's not, the brass is not polished and it's just a late night place for a drink because he doesn't want to go to bed and he will, ironically, you know, he won't go to bed until the sun rises. And think of the irony of that. And of course, why do we go out to bars and restaurants when it's so much cheaper? Once you turn 21, you can buy a six pack for about the same price as if you can buy one drink. But we want to be out with people. We want to socialize. Even if we're not actually socializing, being outside, being with people is comforting. And it keeps us grounded in the time on Earth, right? So, of course, the older waiter understands this. He says we're just two different types of people. I understand. I don't want to go to bed. It's like when you don't want to go to bed. Like sometimes I don't want to go to bed. I don't want the fun to be over. I don't want to say goodnight to my wife. I just want to stay up because when I go to bed and I turn off the light, one of these nights that's going to be it, right? And that fear of, it's just, it's we're all, we all owe life. We all owe life a death. The sake of, for being alive, we have to die, and that is dreadful, right? Do other animals even contemplate mortality, knowing they're going to die? Now, they tried to do everything they can to survive, but the idea of this existential dread that one day we will cease to exist, right? But what do we do to balance that out is to find our niche, our place, a clean, well lighted cafe for people to take care of us, right? Like the older waiter feels like a caretaker, a nurse of this older man who's self medicating with drinking the brandy. Of course, this recurring metaphor of the shadows of the leaves, right? It's not, it's this artificialness that the light is making shadows from the leaves. And of course we think of leaves, one of the most ancient symbols is the leaf falling from the tree. If you look at ancient literature, I mean, when a leaf falls, that's death, right? And it's clinging on, clinging to the tree, but it's going to fall, and it will fall to the earth and decompose, and the atoms were turned into other atoms and just disseminate into the universe, right? And then the most famous part of the entire story is the perhaps sacrilegious, if you're religious, it's very sacrilegious, where he amuses himself with, because he smiles at the end, he smiles at the bar with this machine, right? Because he's mocking religion, doing the Hail Mary, full of grace, God is with you, like this, a religious creed, and Hail Mary, it's like Hail God sort of thing, and but he's mocking it, like there is no God. God is not with us, God is nothing, and he's amused by this, right? And he realizes, and it comes back to this theme of dignity, right? And what did he fear, right? He says it was not a fear or a dread. He knew he it was a nothing that he knew too well. It's like, why should I fear something that is inevitable? Um, but it was just, it was all a nothing, and a man was nothing too. Now, perhaps we can debate whether he's actually, he actually thinks he's nothing in the cosmic scheme. Perhaps we all are nothing, but to an existentialist, we all have our individual meaning, right? The world may be meaningless, but we need to find meaning in a meaningless universe. So whether it's taking care of old people in a cafe, whether it's finding a place that's clean, cool, under the shadow of leaves, we need to find our own place. And of course, at the end, the story, very perfectly framed, he's now the one who's the old man asking the barman for a drink. But unlike the old man who's sitting peacefully in a cafe, he's standing in this late night bodega, and with unpolished, the light is too bright, it's pleasant, but not like a clean, well lighted place. And the barman looked at him but did not answer. It was too late for conversation, right? Um, and he says, "You want another one?" And then the waiter finally says, the older waiter says, "No, I need to go." He just liked this. This is just, it was too bright. It's unpolished. This is not a dignified place. And he knows that his place is a place to comfort people. In a way, he's sort of an angelic figure, a caretaker who has a place there for those who need a place of comfort. And then he says, now without thinking further, I'm not even thinking anymore. I will go home to my room. I'm going to lie there. He would lie there in bed. And finally, with daylight, he would go to sleep. Now, what's keeping him up? This dread, this fear, being old, knowing he's going to die. He's obviously lonely. He enjoys the banter with the waiter, but who does he have? What partner does he have? He's lonely too, just like the old man, as we are all lonely, right? Looking for connection in the world, and the insomnia, the inability to go to sleep. And he says many must have what I have and the old man has, especially as you get older and you get closer and closer to death. And I've heard philosophy being discussed as, how do you live life knowing you will die, right? So this story forces us to confront things that we may not want to confront. And when you're young, yeah, you really don't worry about this kind of stuff. It's like YOLO, right? It's like, you take risks, you do crazy things. But as you get older, you start like contemplating, like, what was my life about, and what haven't I done yet, and what can I still do? It's sort of like this midlife crisis. Now these two waiters, the waiter and the patron, they're well past the midlife crisis, but it's like this eternal dread. And Hemingway's stories, I mean, there's like the iceberg theory that he believed in. It's like very little is revealed at the top, but the underneath the iceberg, the big part, the most dangerous part, is what lurks beneath the surface. So let me just leave with this. I mean, stories like this, where you have a character who tries to commit suicide, and if you know Hemingway's biography, he did commit suicide in Ketchum, Idaho. Mental illness, not his powers of writing and virility playing on his mind. His father was a suicide. So it's always haunting when you see authors kind of foreshadow It's like David Foster Wallace in Infinite Jest. He talks about suicide in that famous book that's gargantuan. I'm almost finished it now. But, he committed suicide at 46. And the idea here of how to maintain one's life and one's dignity when you feel like you're no longer a productive member of society, no longer virile, no longer having the appetites that youth and confidence all convey. And we can now attribute it to mental illness like heart issues or lung issues. But stories like this, really help us hopefully to understand part of the human condition. Take care. Thank you for listening.